presentation, even as we have persons returning to the room. Michelle,
I am just realizing that you guys missed my presentation. Could you say from where that you weren't able to hear me? Because I'm just seeing the message,
well, we got disconnected about 10 minutes ago.
which
So,
is almost the entire presentation. Okay. All right. So I'll give the presentation one more time because it was when I ended, I realized the message that came in.
I think you were on the slide which spoke about create,
Okay.
mainstream faster. I think that's the slide you were on when we got disconnected.
Let me upload and you can direct me in terms of where
Yeah.
exactly I was.
Okay.
Did you get up to there?
No,
Okay.
right here. That's where you were.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. All right. So I will continue. Um, so I was actually pointing out that the SIDAP or our action plan, youth development action plan, really the objective is that we seek to foster genuine participation and partnership with young people in all aspects of national and regional development. We also seek to ensure that investment in adolescent and youth are appropriate to their life changes and the circumstances. I One of the things that my other colleagues would have pointed out is that you know they use an approach of the life cycle approach, which is something very similar. It's the same approach that we actually adopted in that you and I will know that we have a very large range of young people. The CARICOM looks on ages 10 to 29, and when we look into that group, we see that is categorical. So normally, those between age 10 to say 12 will be going through puberty. Their needs are different from those who are actually going through the adolescent stage or later in later adolescence. The research will tell us that at this stage, a younger stage, they seek the evaluation of those persons who are close to them. When they get a little bit older, it's a little bit different because the self-confidence and all of these things are, and esteem is actually being built. So they rely a little bit more on themselves in terms of how they evaluate themselves, and their needs are also different. When we look on the older group, one of the things that we realize is that the older group are more in tune with wanting higher education, wanting to start saving to buy their houses, to expand their lives. And so some of the difficulties and the challenges come in. So one of the things that we realize is that the needs are actually different across the various groups. The action plan also seeks to guide the development of sustained regional research and information and knowledge across the youth development agenda. It also fosters adolescents and youth awareness and appreciation of the Caribbean identity, culture, and citizenship. Essentially, what we want to do, we don't want our Caribbean people to lose their identity. Yes, we are living in a global society, but whilst we identify as global citizens, it is important for us to keep our uniqueness in terms of our Caribbean identity and the culture that we embrace. You'll see that it's different when you go to other parts of the world. So, given our objectives, the six goals that we have identified um, are as listed here. We are looking on education and economic empowerment. How is it that we can help to build the education of our young people to prepare them for decent jobs, protection, safety, and security? One of the things that we look on is how we can mitigate crime and violence at the national level, health and wellness. And one of the things that we see, especially during this time of COVID now, is the mental health of our young people is being impacted. I mean, it impacts everyone, all of us, in terms of our mental health, but we also see it happening more among our young people because of the changes that are happening in our environment. Sexual and reproductive health is one of the areas that we have to zoom in very closely with our young people, especially the adolescents, because across the Caribbean we'll realize that there's high levels of teenage pregnancies, and so the goal seeks to help into improving their health and holistic well-being. We look on culture, identity, and citizenship, and I sort of spoke to that before: policy, institutional framework, leadership, participation, and governance. So there are programs that we actually create to actually ensure that that we build the leadership capacity of our youth. We have them engage and participate in different committees, groups across both at the regional and the national level, which I'll go in a little bit later. At present, what we're doing, we're actually revising the SIDAP. And how are we revising the SIDAP, and why are we revising the SIDAP? The SIDAP was actually, as I mentioned earlier, much earlier, that the SIDAP was actually created in 2012 and emanated from a research that was done that looked very closely on the challenges and issues that are being experienced by young people, as well as the opportunities that were available to them during that time. You and I will know that given the changes that are happening both at the global level, in terms of the social changes, the economic changes, the environmental changes, the technological changes, that there are a number of additional things that our young people are faced with. And so we are looking on expanding the goals to take into consideration some of these changes that exist. We're also looking on strengthening regional coordination and youth participation. There's also a need for us to create a sense of ease for measurement of youth development across the region, more specifically the Caribbean community. So we're looking closely on some of the specific indicators that are in the action plan, such as unemployment, adolescent pregnancy, access to decent jobs, entrepreneurship, etc. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the other mechanisms that are used to facilitate the youth development program is the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors Program. And I'm sure many of you would have heard about this program before. And essentially, it was established by the community to facilitate youth participation and partnership in regional integration process, both for national and regional development. It also comprises of one male and one female across the different member states and associate member state, of which Anguilla is a part of. Now, the other aspect is, what support can we give to the Anguilla's youth development agenda? I'll tell you that I work very closely with the member state, more so with Avon, who has been very agile in terms of how she responds to me, in terms of the inquiries that I may have, in terms of things that are needed. There is a continuous dialogue between the youth program in the CARICOM and that which is happening in Anguilla. So one of the overall areas that we do is to provide policy guidelines and to help in human capital development through our programming and capacity building. And we not only help in the capacity building of our youth, but also to youth workers, of which next year we will be taking on board the capacity building of our youth workers in specific areas so that they can help in the empowerment of our young people. We also provide a multi-sectorial framework to track the progress of the youth development goals. Now, just to go back a little bit, that in terms of tracking the youth development goals, we quite recently we sent out our achievement matrix, and what this achievement matrix matrix really is to look closely on the indicators, and have each member state respond to us in terms of where they are in terms of implementation of the CDAP, in terms of the specific areas that I would have mentioned before. So it helps us to track what is actually going on within each member state, of which we had our consultation a few days ago, on Thursday last week, of which Anguilla was a part, and report was made in terms of where you're at and what is being done. So it helps us to know exactly where each country is at. Now, what are the available resources that we have for networking and partnership? Our youth program actually gives access to our young people across the region who have similar interests through different programming. And we also have mentors through specific programs that I will speak to a little bit later. So they have guidance in terms of the things that they're doing to further empower them, to further strengthen them. We also have our youth ambassador program that I mentioned before, that gives the opportunity for both national and for them to have a national and regional voice, as the youth ambassadors actually get the opportunity to formulate their projects or initiatives at the national level, where they will be able to empower other young people, as well as they have the opportunity to engage at the regional level through various mechanisms, one of which we use is the SG engagement, which is the Secretary General's engagement, which happens once per year. And so what happens in that engagement is that they will put forward recommendations. Well, initially they put forward the area of discussion that they would like to have. And in that discussion and engagement, what they do is put forward their recommendations in terms of how they see things working as we move forward. Also, it helps in terms of the facilitation of regional integration. We work very closely with the Trade and Economic Integration Directorate, more specifically the Agriculture Program. And one of the things that I've seen, especially through a specific program that we're presently delivering, is the access that we have that has been given to young people in terms of linking them to regional experts across the different member states. And so this program actually helps young people to actually form network and partnership that can actually help them move forward. It also give them the opportunity to come in contact with those in similar interest groups. Let me test. Are you hearing me before I continue?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that we have seen, and it has been a little remarkable for me, that seeing and hearing some of the young people and the initiative that they have come up with, because since recently, just a week ago, they decided in this particular program that we're offering, they decided to create a group, a support group among themselves across the Caribbean. So we have 21 countries that are involved in this program. And what they have done, they have created a private Facebook page where they can go to help each other, so that that level of integration is happening. How are we, and what are the strategies that we're using for youth mainstreaming? My colleagues would have mentioned, more specifically, the Commonwealth would have mentioned their approach to youth mainstreaming, which is an approach that we have also adopted. Essentially, the CDAP was created with an intention to implement across the different sectors. So there's a sectoral approach that is used. So we don't have the CDAP being implemented only through the youth arm or through the youth sector. What we have is that it's implemented through the education sector, the health sector, environment sector, the crime and security sector, and all the other sectors that will actually engage in offering youth programs or youth initiative. We also engage with technocrats in various sectors, as I mentioned before. So even in revising the CIDAP, one of our consultations that we'll be doing will be with technocrats across the different sectors to get their input and also their buy-in on the fact that the youth development department within Anguilla and the other member state should have a whole in terms of what is happening, or oversight to what is happening where youth programs are actually being delivered across the different ministries. We are actually looking on developing a youth mainstream framework, which will actually provide advice and guidelines at both for mainstreaming both at the regional and the national level. And by this, we are starting with ourselves. So one of the things that is being done is that we're linking the CIDAP to other policies and plans internally in the secretariat. And as well, what we want to have happening is that you at the national level will be able to link your policies with other existing policies within the public sector, and to also help in terms of the youth development agenda by strengthening the youth development agenda. What is our commitment to Anguilla? I would have mentioned before that I have a very close connection with the youth department, and so our function really is to provide the policy formulation process, to guide in the policy formulation process in terms of programming and to provide technical advice. It would have been mentioned earlier that one of my specific role or expertise is really organizational psychology, and I will widen that a bit. That is applied psychology, and essentially what we do is to look on research and tailor research use the research to tailor programs or interventions in such a way that it meets the needs of the social group that we're working with. So in terms of the programs that you're developing, we can also have an input in terms of what happens and what should happen in terms of how it can impact the young people a little bit more effectively. So the programs and initiatives that are available under the CIDAP. Some of you would have heard about the Creativity for Employment and Business Opportunity, otherwise known as the CEBA program. The CEBA program has been delivered across about 15 member states so far, and the results have been tremendous in that we have noted persons who have actually developed business out of this initiative and have actually gone beyond their national reach to developing products that are being exported. The program actually looks on vulnerable youth who has an interest in entrepreneurship. And so what we do, we take them through a process where they're able to expand on their business. And during that process, we will give them a stipend or a seed fund that will help them to develop their first initial prototype so that they can actually start their business. And from there onwards, they will continue in what they're doing. What we have now presently being delivered is our Aspiring Youth Empowerment Program. And this program also looks on entrepreneurship, a mentorship component, and developing agribusinesses. But not only do we look on these specific areas, the program was actually developed out of the need or the recognition of the gaps that exist in financial literacy among our young people. And so there is one module in the program that actually looks specifically on building the competencies of our young people in financial literacy. The response to this was tremendous. I saw eyes being opened. I saw brains being developed during this process. We also look on the gaps that exist in terms of their self-development, looking on scaling skills that are required for both personal and their professional progress. And so we have been working very closely with these young people. Initially, when we advertised the program, we had 2,845 persons responding or applying to the program. And from that, we actually selected 200 and will be administering the program over a period of time to all the others who are not able to be a part of the program now. But as we continue the program, and we're actually at week 5, where they're actually going through the ideation process, where they're actually changing the concepts that they have and bringing it into reality. And it has been a tremendous and a remarkable journey that I've watched over the past 5 weeks, just to see how young people are growing and how their minds are expanding. There's a quotation that says that once a mind is exposed to any experience or encounter, it can never go back to its original dimension. And this is what I'm seeing happening, and the feedback that are coming from the young people have been wonderful. We are actually working with these young people, and after the 6 weeks, they will be assigned mentors who will actually help them in furthering the development of their business. Start a handholding process that will help them to expand and to be empowered to become entrepreneurs. Our next aspect is the partnership that we have with international bodies. And in order for us to do some of the programs that we have to partner with CDB, we have to partner with the Commonwealth Secretariat, PAHO, UNICEF, UNESCO, ECLAC, among many others, in order to reach the number of youth participants that we would like to reach. Now, just to conclude my presentation today, and I think this phrase, when I came across it, it really summed up essentially what we're seeking to do. So it says we cannot always build a future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. Our intention as a youth development program is really to help, to strengthen, to empower our young people so that they will be able to not only survive but to thrive, and they will be able to negotiate the things that are available to them, and be able to navigate the space that they're in. Because some young people might think that, hey, my limitations are here, and because of my limitations I can't go forward. Or responsibility, both myself and my colleagues today, is really to handhold and our young people, to bring them and to empower them into a future that they can actually live healthy and wholesome lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michelle. We are going to have our final panelist, Yoshabel Durand. Yoshabel Durand is a national of the Commonwealth of Dominica and is a proud descendant of the island's first people, the Kalinagos. She holds a BA in International Relations and an MA in International Development. Yoshabel has worked in many areas of social development, including youth development, education, human trafficking, gender equity and equality, refugee and asylum seeking, sustainable development, social protection, and social resilience. Please welcome Yoshabel Durand.
Good morning, everyone. Apologies for that. Slight technical difficulty. Thank you for the introduction. I realize I'm the last in a long line of panelists, and you've been here for a bit. So I will try to be as brief as possible. I represent the Human and Social Division of the OECS Commission. The youth work for the Commission sits in the portfolio of the Social Development Unit. So what I'm about to present to you would be the direction that the Social Development Unit is taking with regards to youth development in the OECS territories. The first guiding document for us in the social development unit would be the social inclusion and social protection strategy. Its vision is to take into consideration the entire life cycle of the individual member in the OECS region. The idea is that every stage of life, every demographic, every grouping affects another. We consider the youth demographic as being the pivotal generation because you straddle the children and you straddle the adult world. For us, a young person or youth will be defined as the person between 15 and 29 years of age. These are your newly budding professionals, your academics, your parents. These are the persons who basically sit at the point in life where they make a contribution to both the child world and the adult world, and they affect what they do will also affect the elderly. So we consider youth very important and pivotal. For the youth development strategy, how we look at it is we want to position the OECS as a catalyst for youth development. We want to provide the instruments, the spaces, the legislation for you to the youth to decide for yourself what you would like to do, how we would like to do it, and we aid and abet in getting you to that point. We believe that all young persons have the agency to decide for themselves the type of life that they would really like to undertake, they would really like to live, and they are fully capable of deciding and moving in that direction. But that is the reason our objective is to facilitate the agency of youth to live a life that they choose, free of discrimination and insecurity, and fully knowledgeable about their rights and responsibilities as citizens of the OECS region. For us, we see the Commission's role, as I said, as facilitatory. So the first thing we have to do as the Commission is to ensure that there is updated data and information available on the situation of youth in the region. I'm sure all of you have seen that when we speak of the Caribbean or if we speak of the OECS region, we're usually linked with a bigger region, which is usually the Latin American region. So the representation for youth is at best minimal, or exaggerated or underrated. So for the Commission, one of our duties is to ensure that information is available on youth. So we're going to have a monitor and evaluation sector. We're also going to ensure that youth work and youth voices is mainstreamed across all of our units at the Commission. We want to have an open channel of communication. So you as a young person, if you would like to speak with or get information or support from any one of our officers, the opportunity and the avenue is there. We want to also build the capacity, not just of young persons in the region, but the persons who serve the young people. So the directors of youth, the persons who work with the juvenile facilities, your ministers, anybody who has a role to play in the development process of youth in the region, we are interested in building their capacity to do so. Commission will also be responsible for creating these networks that all of our organizations prior have said, our sister organizations, the Commonwealth, CARICOM, CDB. We believe in a collaborative approach. OECS is not the only organization functioning in this region, and we believe that if we work together as a grouping, we could bring the plight or the situation of youth to the fore in a much better manner. For the youth strategy, there are 5 pillars. The first of this would be youth engagement, communication, and outreach. And for that, we have the OECS program or initiative. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it with our 7 pillars. And it goes with the yes, I earn, yes, I learn, yes, I belong, yes, I matter, yes, I express, yes, I move, and yes, I inherit. The aim of this program is to ensure that we have an open channel of communication with the young persons of the region to hear your opinions, but to also present you with information that might be pertinent for your further development. Next pillar. Oh, and I want to also mention, going forward in my presentation, you will see some pictures. They are taken from our OECS Yes in Action platform. The idea behind this is to celebrate youth and what they're doing and their accomplishments. So I have selected some of our features who best impersonate the pillar of the strategy that I'm presenting. For this is wealth creation. I'm not sure some of you recognize this athlete. She's from Anguilla, Herschel Mead. She was one of our first features on this OACSES in action. Under wealth creation, we are not just looking at the entrepreneurial spirit, which we would be investing in, assisting in building, but in defining a young professional. Because a young professional is not just an entrepreneur, it's not just your entry-level person, but it is a young person with ideas. It's a young person who comes with a vision, with a dream, and we would like to help you develop this definition in the region and promote this. We would also like to build the arts and cultural industries into something that is business worthy and that can be used as an income generating sector, as well as a sports industry. We believe that not just our athletes, but our coaches, our referees, our heads of organizations in the sporting industry all need to be enabled, empowered, so that they can push the agenda for sports as an industry and not just as an extracurricular activity. Our next pillar would be education and training, and our representative from the OACSES is Lauren Bozen from Martinique. She is an entrepreneur who pushes the development of the region through education. Under this pillar, we want to promote lifelong learning. Learning is not just for secondary school or college, it is something that you do throughout the entire lifespan. And we want to ensure that the opportunities are there for young persons if they want to change their careers midway, if they have just now figured out what they want to do with their life. We want to have the opportunities there and waiting that can assist you in attaining the education and qualifications that you need. We also want to work with increasing the employability to give you the skills, the experience, and the knowledge that you need in order to be the best you that you can be in the professional world. And that would include linking you up with mentors, so you learn with people who've come before you. On the panel, you have a lot of persons with a plethora and endless supply of experience and knowledge, but I'm very sure if you reach out to who would be very happy to sit and have a chat with you and help you decide for yourself what's the best route to take. For health and wellness, our rep is David Kentish from Antigua and Barbuda. He's a male nurse. And it is very sad that I have to say male nurse, since we still consider nursing as a generally female-dominated field. But on the health and wellness, we would like to see progress made in health and reproductive health, and sex and reproductive health. The knowledge is there, the policies, the programs are there to assist young persons to not only explore, but to live a healthy sexual reproductive health lifestyle. And we are hoping to work with a number of partners in this vein. The healthy mind and body, mental health is an issue that has surfaced a number of times, and with COVID, it is something that's on everybody's radar. We want to assist in facilitating the capacity building, the opportunities that young persons have for accessing proper mental health and proper health information and services throughout the region. Social and sustainable development is our final pillar. And our representative for the social development is a young man called Lazaric Montout from St. Lucia. He went through our juvenile justice reform project, and he was one of our successful candidates. This is him representing St. Lucia at the Caribbean Summit for Youth Violence Prevention. I apologize for the background noise. It is raining very heavily in St. Lucia right now. Under the social development wing, we would like to look at child and youth protection systems and legislation. And this is to deal with any of the policies or any of our laws, national or regional, which affect the safety and justice that we afford our young persons across the region. We want to ensure that young persons are aware of these and their rights under these. And of course, access to proper social protection programs. Part of that would take this into consideration. And finally, the sustainable development arm of this pillar. Our rep is from, I believe, St. Vincent, is from Grenada, and her name is Araya Laidlow. She's a climate change researcher. And the idea for this one is to promote not just resilience in the face of climate change, but sustainable development means something that is lasting, something that you put in place that will have an impact generations after you. So for us, sustainable development means going at the community level, so the community development, to bring in our traditional knowledge and advance it, adapt it to suit what we need right now. If you look around you, a lot of times the solutions that are proposed for the environmental crisis that we face are actually solutions that are traditional in nature. We go back to our indigenous, back to the knowledge of our forefathers. So this idea is that we create our own development path. How do the youth see development in the region? What would they like to see happen to change? What would they like to see in their region? That would be the essence of this particular pillar. And that would conclude how we are going to approach the work that the SDU will be doing going forward. This gentleman is the Kalinago chief from Dominica. He is the second youngest to hold the position. He entered when he was 22, Lorenzo Sanford. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yoshabel. And thanks to all of the panelists who made presentations this morning. We're now opening up the floor for questions, comments. I'd like to say to those persons that are watching via Facebook that you can post your messages on the Facebook page and we will ask the questions. I think there are also a few persons that are also on the Zoom call. If they have questions, they could just write that question in the chat. Any questions? Don't all rush at once. Comments? You would have been in your groups yesterday. Are there any concerns that you have, any ideas that you have that any of these agencies might be able to take into consideration? None at all. I saw so many people taking notes.
I think I have a question. I'm not sure, but you mentioned in the last presentation, you mentioned male nurses being nurses in general are automatically labeled as a female position. What recommendations or solutions do you think we as Caribbean islands can do to promote more male nurses in that industry? Because as a young man, I think it's very important, not saying that a female nurse can't help me out in whatever situation I'm in. However, I think it's more comforting to know that I have another male that I can talk to about certain issues that we go through. And I think it will also eliminate the stigma around men going to seek a doctor or medical attention, and it will also eliminate prostate cancer, colon cancer, STDs. So I think that male nurses should be of utmost importance. So I want to know what are some suggestions that we can do as Caribbean islands to promote men into that field.
Any of the panelists would like to respond?
That's a very good question. And I do agree with your point that it is possible if we had more representation in the nursing field with young men, that you might get men who are more likely to seek medical attention. In order to do this, we need to actually destigmatize it because we see nursing as a caring profession and we immediately think women, and it has been proven, I guess, scientifically that biologically, women tend to be more nurturing. It doesn't say that men are not. So we need to teach our young men that it is okay to display such qualities. So it begins with a re-socialization of our young men and our young women too, because if our young women do not value that in our young men, it is unlikely that they would display such qualities. But it begins with us, it begins with you, it begins with me, that when we speak to the younger generation, we encourage in each other.
Morning, everyone. I just would like to add to what Yoshibel was saying just now, because a lot of it has to do with where we are in our heads as a society. We don't think anything of having a male gynecologist as a woman. Um, and in fact, more recently, doctors in general who are men. So a lot of it has to do with what we see as a norm. And I had, I guess, the privilege to be at Health City Cayman last year, November, and they have a large significant of male nurses. And in fact, there are certain parts of the job that they rely on the men to do because of the nature of their work. They have a lot of heavy lifting and turning because of the sort of surgeries that they take on. So you don't even think male nurse, it's just a nurse. And then you want the big strapping one to turn over the big strapping patient, and so you know which nurse you're gonna call. Yeah, so like I was saying, it just has to do with how we see these things and recognizing that they're not really logical in many cases.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have CDB, we have OECS, we have CARICOM.
On the same note, I want to know, because most of the time, by the time the child finishes school, they already know, most of them already know what they want to become. So how could we take it back to the school level where we can promote more nurses in terms of male nurses instead of just females? Because if we're going to just leave it on the surface, it means that most of the time when children come out of school, it's still going to be the same norm. So how could we take it back to our schools?
Hello. Hi, it's Kimberly here from CDB. Do you mind if I jump in?
Sure.
Want to talk, Kimberly? Go ahead.
Yes, no, this is a very important question, and it's a subject of much discussion amongst development partners and including within CDB, and features in our commitments to support development in the region via our gender equality policy and operational strategy, as well as within the youth policy and operational strategy. And what we find is, as we undertake the research, there's great evidence in terms of the links between gender and traditional roles. And we've been promoting the opportunities for our young people in non-traditional subjects. So these are subjects which tend to be where one gender is overrepresented vis-a-vis another, as well as work in non-traditional roles. And of course, as you've said, this is linked to our socialization, to the way we stereotype certain roles. And so what we have been doing is embedding this in the work on gender equality and social inclusion across our education projects. So in terms of educating young people, as well as persons in families, so caregivers, parents, guardians, and teaching as well. And in teaching, because a lot of the socialization, the stereotyping, the guidance on choices in terms of subject selection, and therefore the life path on which we're placed. This is based on how we're socialized in our homes and the messages we receive at home, as well as in our communities and in our schools. So in our programming, we tend to build capacity to understand the way in which negative norms and gender stereotypes may have adverse impacts on young men and young women, and how it influences their academic choices and their career choices. And so when you mentioned nursing, but also in teaching, when we look at women selecting jobs in terms of engineering and the like. So even though we see women, girls excelling in education and staying in school longer and being 2/3 of those in university, we are not seeing how that is being transferred in terms of job selection. And a lot of it is built around how we are socialized and those harmful norms. So yes, we've been embedding it in a lot of the work we've been doing.
Can I just make a contribution on this area quickly? an aspect of that discussion has serious implications in terms of conditions of work as well as remuneration. Some years ago, quite a bit, I was involved in a reclassification exercise in the public service in St. Lucia. And when the government produced what was their proposal for reclassifying, restructuring the public service, what you found out is that most of those jobs in the public service that as Yoshabel and Kimberly has been saying, um, that were perceived with this traditional stereotyping as jobs mainly occupied by females, when we did this study, we realized that many of them were pegged at a lower level in the structure of the public service, in the classification levels, than those positions that it was perceived were traditionally occupied by men. So they also have those broader implications of that as well.
My final comment, and I'm in agreement, and Mr. Henry just threw in a very, very big wrench into the discussion where the remuneration comes in. But it is also how we portray it as well in the education system. Because when we look at, for me, like me saying male nurse, I should never have said male nurse. I should just have said. So we need to normalize these roles for young men and young women where we don't make the distinction. And if you have a young woman in STEM, it's something that we celebrate as something so abnormal. We need to make it normal so that a young girl going through the school system can see that that is a potential for me. It is not something that is so unheard of or so limited or narrow in scope. So for our education system, our teachers need to assist in helping to normalize the various career paths so that a young person can see this as something that they can do going forward.
May I just jump in a little, please? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
Thank you. Just to reiterate some of the things that were said and also endorsed, because as we look on such a situation, what we're realizing that it requires a re-socialization and mindset change, not only in our education system, but in our wider society, starting from the home. And just to add that it's the CARICOM's hope that we will be able to implement the Caribbean New School model, which will actually bring about a mindset and a culture change within the education system itself. Not specifically as it relates to just nursing, but generally how we socialize our children and help them to relearn some of the things that they have learned before. And as well, to help our teachers to relearn some of the behaviors that or unlearn some of the behaviors and learn new behaviors for delivering the Caribbean New School model. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question, a few questions, but we'll start over here. I see 3 more hands go up, but we'll start right here.
Good morning. This question is directed towards Pillar 6 as it relates to food security. Just a question. Given the reality that Anguilla has challenges when it comes to our fertility of our land and also the quality of our water, what assistance is there out there in order to aid us in enhancing that quality of water and land fertility? And I'm not sure if across the region, if there are other countries that has this same challenge, and I would like to hear any feedback in terms of what they have done to combat it, and for just to give us some suggestions on where we start in terms of that.
Just quickly, not in terms of the water quality, but the University of the West Indies, they have especially here at St. Augustine, in the agriculture department, they very, very mindful of that we are into a phase, a concept of agriculture that is not the traditional of just having a mass of land, and also the load of fertilizer and all of this kind of thing. So they have been developing certain techniques, and I think it's open for countries, ministries of agriculture, and other agencies to engage with them. They prepared to do the training with young people, with agencies, looking at, for want of a better phrase, vertical agriculture, using some PVC and setting up a PVC thing like a little, a few steps, like in just your little yard, and you could plant your lettuce, your a lot of the things. So they've been doing that. So they have that possibility available. Like I said, not necessarily with the quality of the water. I suspect one will have to be looking at things like farming, rainwater, whatever they call it. But in terms of you doing agriculture, producing food without necessarily having to rely on large expanses of land or fertile soil, but using hydroponics, as was mentioned by the colleague yesterday, is there are support from the university and other agencies beyond those that are here, the international, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and there's, I always have difficulty remembering the full acronym, but there's one called IFAD. If you go on their website, IFAD, IFAD, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, you'd notice that they have extensive programs targeting young people and targeting new approaches to agriculture, bearing in mind that there are many societies where even urban agriculture, in the sense of there are many places, societies where you don't have the land availability and those things. Yeah, so you could do some of that research. IFAD, IFAD, and Food and Agriculture Organization, and the University of West Indies Department of Agriculture at St. Augustine here.
Also, just to add, and I will not be able to expand in terms of what needs to happen, but the CARICOM Secretariat has actually produced food safety and security policy in recent times, like a few months ago, that is also available to member states. I'm sure you maybe will be able to find some guide in that. I think it is available on our website. If it's not, I can make it become available to you guys.
Thank you. I think the question was also directed at me because I did reference our Pillar 6, looking at mainstreaming youth in issues around disaster management, climate change, food security, and the like. Let me say I am a social analyst. What I presented is our framework for youth responsive development, which includes youth mainstreaming across the work of the bank, and that includes agriculture. In 2019, CDB would have published a study on the state of agriculture. CDB working with FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, the state of agriculture in the region, and that research informed the bank's new agriculture policy and strategy paper, or APSP. We have a number of experts in the bank who are focused on agriculture, looking at the very issues you have raised. And I would be happy to follow up after this meeting as well to make those connections. So the idea is that we work closely with our various experts across the bank in their areas of expertise to strengthen youth development, to give young people the opportunity to answer some of these very questions, and to pair them, of course, with the primary and secondary data collected from other sources. But in terms of the critical responses, I cannot, from based on where I sit, give you those responses, but I can point you in the direction of the colleagues in-house who are working on those issues and responding to some of the very issues you have raised in terms of countries affected by drought conditions and countries who are grappling with responding to food insecurity in light of fertility challenges, soil fertility challenges as well.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next question.
My question is in relations to the youth development in helping start new businesses. I know there was a mention of financial support. Does that financial support extend to educating those persons in the new business? Because there are a lot of young persons that have very great ideas for new businesses and are very passionate about them. However, their educational background is not as strong to help them to develop the plans for this new business. Does that financial support help them to get educated in the areas that they need to so that they can better execute their businesses at mine?
Okay, just to respond to the question locally. So at present, we have the Anguilla Get Set Entrepreneurial Program, where we provide training for young people between the ages of 18 to 35 years old. And that training includes different training in businesses. And at the end of the training, the young person can present his or her business plan to the enterprise development officer, and then they're eligible to receive up to 28,000 EC as startup capital in the form of a loan towards their business. So that's 10,000 US. So in the past, what we've done is promote the different programs that's offered by probably OECS or other organizations or other departments to assist young people in getting their businesses recognized regionally or internationally.
Any of the panelists would like to respond to that question? No? Okay, so we're going to go on to the next. Yeah.
Okay, good morning. My question has to do with cultural awareness and Caribbean identity. It was alluded to when we were listening to the presentation from the CARICOM Youth Development Action Plan. Actually, one of the main objectives that was presented was to foster an awareness and appreciation of Caribbean identity. Now, we know that across the Caribbean, we have a wide variety of cultural expressions, and we are alike in many instances, but we are very varied. So my question is basically, what are some of the approaches that individual member states can use to highlight in order for our young people to have that Caribbean identity, but still at a local level to have their cultural identity established? With the background, with the understanding that we live in a globalized world where we're very heavily influenced by Western culture, America, Europe, and others. What are some of the areas or what are some of the advice that you can give locally and regionally for young persons to embrace their cultural identity, not just on a Caribbean level, as was mentioned as one of the objectives, but at a local level?
Okay, hello again, everyone. Yes, you are correct that one of our emphasis is really to for us to maintain or have our young people maintain their Caribbean identity. And there is a wide, as you clearly put it, that there are diversity across the different Caribbean countries. So on a national level, one of the things, well, let me back up a little bit. Regionally, there is what is called the Ideal Caribbean Youth. There is a profile that is created, and it's something that we try to promote at the national level so that we try to nurture and empower our young people to develop these characteristics. Across the different member state. However, at a national level, the things that are unique to you should and must be endorsed through the education system, because that's where most of the learning takes place. And essentially, one of the things that we would recommend is that a lot of times, as much as we're in a global society and we have adopted some of the principles that are happening in the wider developing countries, we should not at any point in time negate the things that are unique to our culture and the things that cause us to be who we are. So how are we implementing this through the curriculum that is being used at both the primary, secondary, and the tertiary level. So these are areas that we need to look on closely. I'll tell you from a personal experience that I'm Jamaican and I'm presently living in Guyana. And coming to Guyana, I'm realizing the culture is absolutely different. How do I embrace my identity as a Jamaican? It has been fascinating for me because when I was back home, reggae and dancehall music was something I listened to just periodically. Some of the things in terms of even our native foods and practices, phrases that we use, weren't things that I would actually carry out all the time. Now that I'm in Ghana, it's a distinct thing about me that I will embrace the Jamaican reggae, the dancehall music. At home, I will cook my Jamaican food, and I will look on use some of the dialogues that we use and in Jamaica, even among Guyanese, not only for them to understand what it is, but also to ensure that my identity is known because I am proud to be Jamaican. And so these are some of the things that we need to instill in our young people, that regardless of where you go in the world, that you must remember your roots. You have to remember where you're coming from, and you have to be able to embrace the things that that was used to nurture you as you grow up as an adult. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Could I jump in here?
Sure, go ahead.
As part of one of our pillars in the social and sustainable development section, it is that idea of identity and culture. Culture is dynamic, it's true, it grows with you, but it is also the idea that you inherit something. As my colleague has said, she's Jamaican and she's in Guyana. I'm Dominican and I'm in St. Lucia, and I work across the region. And what has struck me a lot is, yes, we have a lot of similarities, but we are very different and distinct as well. And what we need to do is celebrate that, not just the distinctness, but when you think of yourself as Anguillan, what do you think of? What do you see? What would you like people to know about you that is Anguillan? What are you proud of? And part of the difficulty that we have, I have noticed in the region for framing our identity, even as young people, is finding that point of pride. What is it that you feel pride in being Anguillan, that you want the rest of the world to know, that you associate with yourself? So we need to, as young persons and the older generation, impart that knowledge and that pride onto our next generation. If you look at a US citizen, they are the number one person on earth. A US life is worth more than any other life in the world. That did not just happen today for tomorrow. That was a process of them teaching that history, of them teaching that love of self. So we need to ensure that the aspects of our culture that make us who we are, we teach it, and we ensure that it is enshrined in the person as they grow up throughout their lives.
Thank you. We will move on to the next question.
Hi, good morning. My question has to do with juvenile reform, and not just juvenile reform in general. How can we as a society or government or nation go about, let's say, removing the stigma of persons who may have committed offenses, especially as youth persons? Not just to have a program to empower them, but to ensure that as they go on in life, that they still have those job opportunities, they can still start their own businesses and so forth. So it's like, what can we do as a nation and government to facilitate that, especially for persons who own businesses, to not discriminate and say, well, you know, you've committed an offense, you've been to jail, so I don't want to hire you. Like, what can we do to help to aid the young people that are in these situations, as well as business owners and so forth, to help remove that stigma?
As part of the Juvenile Justice Reform Project that OSS is in the second stage of completing, we're doing now diversion and reintegration, and your question has come up a few times. If a juvenile offender comes in contact, when a young person comes in contact with the law, when they have served their term, when they've gone to the juvenile facility and they have graduated from the facility, their records are supposed to be sealed. So as a juvenile offender, when you apply for a job, an employer cannot ask for those records and cannot hold those records against you. It is part of the rights of the child when they come in contact with the law. But what we can also do in educate persons as to that aspect of the law, educate the young persons so that they are aware that this is not something that should be asked of them and held against them. But also we as a government and we as institutions should work with the private and the government sectors to embrace these persons. And it should start with the government leading by example, that when these persons come for employment or when these persons apply for a job, that we do not use this as a criteria against it, and we do employ these young persons. For the private sector, it would be the same thing to hold them to account, that they cannot discriminate. And if more persons were supposed to speak out against it, then it would become a talking point. Because what you're saying may be happening very frequently, but how often do you hear about it at the level where something can be done about it? So social media is a very powerful tool, or you speak to your parliamentary representative, but you bring it to the attention of policymakers, of the persons who are able to assist, so that we can begin the re-education process and we know what needs to be done to re-educate our personnel.
If I could just respond to that on the local level. Yoshibel, you would have mentioned the Juvenile Justice Reform Project, which Anguilla has been a part of. We're just coming to the very end of completing our child justice bill. We hope to send that to Executive Council next week. One of the things that does is it speaks to the diversion programs that you spoke of, so that actually before a young person comes in contact with the court system, there's an opportunity for diversion. So that bill enables us to do that. It also requires that all criminal cases are reviewed for a view to expunging the records once someone becomes an adult. And finally, as Josabel rightfully said, that information cannot or should not be used against young people looking for employment. In terms of entrepreneurial opportunities, one of the things that we did just recently, Jolene would have spoken about the Get Set program, but we actually did a Get Set program cohort in HMP. And so just last Friday, we had the participants from that program graduate. They would have gotten all of the support that our mainstream Get Set program offers. And in fact, we use young men that were about to be released. And so they too will have the opportunity to apply for the $10,000 to assist them in their ventures. So it's a really important question that you raised, and it's something that we're definitely looking at.
Just to add to what is being said, I'm here. I was thinking about the question as it's being asked. And one of the first things that came to my mind is removal of stigma is usually something very, very difficult to do because it's a systematic change that needs to take place. And I will concur with the things that were said before, especially the fact that it has to be driven at the governmental level first. And it's really about how can we set, in addition to what we have, how can we set organizational policies that will enforce or mitigate the discrimination that will be held against these young people. Additionally, we have to look on how do we change the narrative and the mindset. And the process has to be twofold. Twofold in the sense that we're working with the organization and the society from the broader perspective, but also working with the young people themselves, because change actually occurs sometimes, and it happens much easier when people see a difference in behaviors. So if we work with both those who are coming out of the juvenile system to help them to be a little bit more autonomous, to build their self-esteem, to help them to go into voluntary programs where persons will actually observe that change or that shift in behavior, then the stigma attached to that particular person will be shifted. So we have to look at it from the broader perspective of changing the stigma from a societal level as well as changing the stigma from an individual level. And so when the both of them work together, eventually over time, over a long time, then we will have a change in the attitudes towards persons coming out of this system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will continue to the next question. You want to make a comment on the same question? Oh, so we have one moment.
I'm sorry, I just want to say something real quickly on this, and no one has really mentioned this perspective, but I think it's also important that we approach the whole issue of stigma and also how we respond in more than one way. We also need to remember that it is important that when we are reaching and teaching young people, including children, that we give them a clear message. And what I'm trying to say really is that it's not only about fixing them once they've got caught up in the system. We also need to preach and teach messages in a way that they understand and that they embrace. Because young people and children, sometimes they will be defiant. Often, as teenagers, going through puberty, they will challenge the systems and the norms, and there are consequences for that. So we also need to try, I think, to be sure that the messaging and the consequences are clear so that those who, it's amazing to me how many young people and how many people generally don't know, they don't know stuff, they've never been they don't know what happens with the justice system, they've never had a conversation with the police, these are bad people, they don't know why things are the way they are, they're just rules and laws that big people put in place to stress them. And so they challenge them, and then there are consequences, and then we as a society are scrambling to ensure that they are safe coming out of something that could have been prevented. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
I have a question, and maybe I've missed it somewhere, and it's very similar to what's being said, but I'm speaking more with regards to children and young people who are not in conflict with the law, but are in need of care and protection, and those who have been in places of safety, and what happens for them, because it seems to be very silent, or their voices are very silent in this. Maybe I've missed it, but what is being gleaned from them in terms of what their needs are, particularly when they're leaving care? Because there's a lot of stigma that's attached to them and the services that they receive.
That question is very interesting in the fact that a lot of times the children who need care and protection, as you said, their voices are kind of silent because a lot of times the reason why they need care and protection, they are by law actually shielded a lot. So most people should not be publicized why they needed this care and protection. And the general feeling after they've received the assistance from the state is that they would be in a place where they can go on to lead productive lives. So most of what the help that you're referring to would happen, I wouldn't say in the background, but a little more quietly because they're not as high profile as the juvenile justice cases. So in places like, let's say, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they have a young mothers program where they assist teenage mothers to continue their education and to get employment afterwards. And for a number of countries in our region, you have these programs occurring where you would assist the young persons, those who go for foster care, those who had to be removed from their homes. There are programs under usually the Ministries of Social Services that would assist these young persons. You have programs for psychosocial care in a lot of our countries right now to give that counseling and that extra assistance that they require, and a number of other social safety net programs that would catch them. But for that question that you're asking to be answered in detail. It would have to be what type of assistance that you're looking at, or what is the reason this person was in the care of the state or in need of protection, and you would have more of a targeted response there.
Thank you.
Just to add as well, and this is not from a CARICOM secretarial perspective, but as the question was asked, I recall just before I left to Jamaica that there was a program that was being developed, and I really can't say if it was actually completed, but it was a program that actually addressed precisely what was being asked in terms of those who are coming out of state care. The program actually looked on how the transition period, so they will be carried through a program that will actually assist them in the transition from moving from state care to living normal and normal lives and adapting to the regular societal practices. And so anybody who was like 18 and above would actually be brought through this program and have a handholding process where they will be coached into moving into the regular system. That's an approach that maybe can be taken in terms of because there's a shift that there's a significant shift that takes place when you take them out of state care and put them into the regular system and have them adopt. So how do we then assist them in that transformation in their lives? So we have to look on it as a stage in development, maybe separate and apart from how we look on the adolescent, the youth development itself, but look specifically on what are the things, the needs that they have at this particular point in time, and tailor that program to address those needs.
Thank you.
Colleagues, I just wanted to say very quickly that very often there are a number of variables that enhance the vulnerability of the range of young people we've been discussing. And very often our systems are not developed in a way that privileges the voice and the experiences and the recommendations and the assets possessed by the young people who tend to be more vulnerable and who tend to be at risk of experiencing adverse challenges and perhaps in some instances falling, becoming involved in activities that take them further off track. And I think that very often our responses are framed with inputs from the technical experts, from policymakers, et cetera. And what we have to do is to continue to champion the frameworks and also to build capacity for our duty bearers, so the decision makers and our technocrats, to be able to create spaces where they engage young people as valued partners and as persons who have the lived experiences and have solutions and recommendations for how they want to see policies and programs framed. And I think that is one of the gaps. We have no shortage of lessons learned. We have no shortage of goodwill in many instances, but what we've not been able to do effectively, I think, is to create the spaces where we hear those voices and and I mean, we've been discussing mainstreaming for much of the morning, where we have young people involved in the research that is important and in some instances leading on that, identifying the strategies that are required and being a part of implementation and monitoring and evaluation and reframing and repositioning of the responses. And I think that's one of the things that we need to really bolster capacity to do effectively. If with permission, I wanted to jump back to an earlier question. I think I had been waiting to see if other colleagues were going to respond as well, and then I missed the window. And it was an earlier question on young people who may have differential needs, who may not have the full course of education or may have some gaps there, and how they could benefit from programs of support for, around entrepreneurship and innovation. Traditionally, within CDB, we have been, through our our technical cooperation division, through our CTCS program, we have developed and programs and delivered technical assistance to young entrepreneurs via business support organizations. Based on the lessons we have learned, we are under the youth policy reviewing our programs of support to include coaching, business clubs, incubators, accelerators, etc., to serve as a feeder, a channel into our broader program of support to private sector development. We are in the process of developing the new program, and a key part of our youth policy is promoting gender equality and looking at issues of social inclusion. So where young people are positioned in terms of socioeconomic status, education attainment, indigenous ethnicity, etc. And so that question is very important. The expectation is that we will partner and consult with a range of our partners at the country level and our development organizations as well to craft the responses that are necessary. And so, yes, we will be creating those opportunities for diverse young people, including young people who may not be able to, who don't have that foundation and may not have the capacity to develop business plans. Our program that is to be delivered between now and the end of the year is a short-term intervention. We will be issuing a call for proposals, looking at young people who are operating at the community level, who are already delivering businesses or have business ideas, some of whom may have a business plan or who have no capacity to develop business plans. So we're going to be starting there and work with the range of young people who apply to that program to build out additional support. I want to say very clearly, though, that a lot of what is presented under our youth policy is not necessarily work that CDB will go at alone. As you have heard, we've got colleagues across the region, working across the region, delivering similar programs of support. We've got SIBO within CARICOM. So we're also looking very closely at what is being delivered now to see what the opportunities for synergies are. But certainly our commitment is to delivering our work in a way that leaves no one behind. And so it is important for us to ensure that those young people who are often left out of these opportunities or who don't gain much from these opportunities have the entry points to make sure that they're able to succeed as well. So we'll definitely be looking at the group of young people who may need some additional hand-holding in these programs we're delivering.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, and due to the fact that I have about 5 or 6 more questions, I'm going to ask the persons to just ask the questions one after the other, ensure that it's a question and not a recommendation. And then I'm going to ask the panelists to respond. Okay? So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so go ahead.
Good morning. My question has to do with equality and anti-discrimination. As a region, how do you believe we can tackle gender equality and gender issues? Not only that, but LGBTQ equality and issues, as LGBTQ people face many challenges living in the Caribbean, which leads to migration to where they feel safer and more comfortable.
Question 2.
Hello, my question has to do with human capital development. So a good way in developing human capital is work exchange training programs. So my question is, are there any programs or opportunities available regionally through the various institutions that citizens of small island nations like Anguilla can leverage?
Next question.
All right, my question has to do with education. It was about the teachers. Is there any protocol in place to police teachers to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do? Because we was going through school and sometimes you would see you have a passion for a subject and you go to a new form and a new teacher you get in and then it just die out because the teacher not doing what they're supposed to do. So you just like, it has changed your whole perspective on school and everything, so just that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, One of the presentation mentioned children and youth disabilities. I would like to know what countries are doing in terms of programs or initiatives to include youth who are disabled to be a part of the national youth bodies.
Okay, good morning. Mine is concerning Pillar 1 with the points that we had supporting entrepreneurship with Angolan youth, fostering skills for culture, arts, and entertainment. And you listed a number of programs. One was Aspiring Youth Empowerment Program, other youth ambassador programs along with mentors. Um, my question is, as an interested youth, how would you go about getting involved in such programs to positively affect change in terms of like your culture? There was something about fostering awareness for cultural identity, and how are these programs being, distributed that other youth can learn about it if they're not in certain spaces?
Good morning. I'm speaking in regards to Pillar 2, optimizing youth social and intellectual capital. Now, the summary of the strategic objectives would be to facilitate the development of academically competent, intellectually accomplished, and technologically savvy young people. Also, the SDG goals relating to this pillar would include access to quality and relevant education, as well as accelerating the digitalization of learning environments and augment remote learning. Now, in this day and age, financial resources are scarce, and several regions are also adhering to COVID protocol, such as social distances, working from home, and homeschooling. So my question also fosters a lot of the other questions, which would be with programs. So I'm wondering, are there any affordable online programs or courses being offered by CARICOM, OECS, or the CDB to assist in the social, intellectual, and/or technological growth of our youths and the Caribbean people at large? Thank you.
Just before any of our panelists answer the question, and please feel free to do so, but I'm feeling a little, I don't know how I'm feeling because so many of these questions actually are local in terms of the responses. We have programs in place. It says that somehow we're not getting information out to your young people. So I feel as if I fail and I'm going to have to self-flagellate when I go home. But yes, certainly at a regional, and Elaine, thank you for being there. I know that it is late in the UK, so if any of the panelists would like to answer, please feel free to do so, but we will definitely need to engage a little more with our young people. And also straight up conversation, some of those questions should also be directed to our leaders. They'll be here at 1 this afternoon, so please do come back after lunch and have those same questions ready for the local responses. Thank you.
Go ahead, whoever wants to go first. Pat.
Yes, sorry, let me just try to look at the question around disability. Including young person with disabilities into the program is very important, especially at the National Youth Council level. So what we're trying to do now is to encourage, awareness around how national youth bodies should be doing this. And so the approach to set up the Children and Youth with Disabilities Network is the attempt to begin to share or build capacity for NYCs on how they can do that. It's something the NYCs would have to learn to do. It's not easy to do. It sometimes is also very costly because you'll have to invest in tools that are more accessible, from sign language to easy read materials to transcription services. So it's a journey. We're now just beginning to ensure that young people get an awareness of what they would need to do in their institutions and structures to be more responsive to the needs of young persons with disabilities and integrate them. I'll probably just also add a little bit on the issue with human capital development. I think it's a national issue, and I think that's a question that you will want to engage with at the national level to work out, well, how does the policies that you have facilitate the opportunities that you are seeking as young people? And I think there are many there. It's just that maybe the knowledge and how they are shared needs to be better, maybe looked at. In terms of the equality, very quickly, around the equality issues, I think it's again, it's the standards are very clear internationally, locally, regionally. There is a very clear guidance around gender equality, making sure that we have inclusive spaces. But I think a lot of work needs to go into, helping to build the knowledge and awareness at the level where people are living and experiencing experiencing life. How do they understand these issues? Why are they important? So why are those values and principles that we are holding dear? It's easy to put them and to sign off on these huge declarations and so on, but it needs to be then taken at the national level, at the grassroots level, where we explain to people that the right that somebody has, is a right that is shared. We need to understand that you are getting that space makes my life better, and it's not something that's just a thing apart from me. That it's a part of making society much more equal. So I just want to put that point there and hope that we can have more discussion on how do we actually make these make more aware people in the grassroots about these issues around gender equality and other principles and values.
Okay, I will proceed to answer. Well, it's two questions that I'm going to be addressing. One, the one that spoke about human capital development and how do you get access to some of the programs that that are being delivered. Well, I think Lane actually pointed out that the human capital development is something that has to be addressed at the national level first. One of the things that I will say is that young people need also to take responsibility, that they have the responsibility to seek out information. And I'm saying this as a term to encourage you that not all the times things will actually come to you. You will have to go out there and search for it and be able to reach for the things, know what you want, and be able to reach for the things that you want. That's what resilience is all about: being able to navigate your present environment and negotiate for the limited resources that are available. My colleagues would have mentioned some of the programs that they have that they deliver through their own youth development programs. And I did mention that we offer the SIBA program, as well as presently we're offering the Aspiring Youth Empowerment Program. No, the SIBA program has been delivered. I don't think it was delivered in Anguilla as yet, and I say as yet because usually the SIBA program is delivered in conjunction with other international development bodies, because it has an economic component, and usually when we get funding is when we partner to actually deliver this program. How it is done is that we usually send a notice to the youth division or the youth department, who will actually actively search for or send out something in the public space using their social media platforms to recruit young people and mobilize young people to apply for this program. And usually when we do it, within each group, it's about 15 to 30 persons that is usually addressed. The last time we did it in 5 countries: in Trinidad, Jamaica, Belize, Haiti, and Barbados. And those countries use the mechanism to send out the application, and persons were actually mobilized and participated in the program. I'm sure at some point in time, when the program is actually being delivered again, that Anguilla will have the opportunity to be a part of this. As it relates to our Aspiring Youth Empowerment Program, this was done through many, we used many mechanisms to get the word out. The first one we used was through our youth directors at the member state level. So Anguilla and all the other member states would have gotten a flyer, and they would actually send out this flyer. The flyer had information in terms of the link that they should go to make the application and submit. We also use our website. We use our Facebook page. Actually, we use all the social media platforms to post this information out there. So it would really be a situation where you're actually there and you're searching, or you're on Facebook and you see this. And it has been also passed on from, we use our youth ambassadors to pass this on to other young people. So there are a number of mechanisms that were used. As I mentioned in my presentation, that what we had was 2,845 persons applying, and we had 8 persons from Anguilla, 8 young persons from Anguilla that were applying. When we did the selection process, 4 of the 8 were selected. And so those 4 persons would be a part of the program. So these are young people who actually sent an application and they were given the opportunity to be a part of the entire system. Now, I'll also mention in terms of human capital development that the Caribbean New School model that has been developed or implemented over time is actually done through our HRD 2030 strategy, which actually looks on building the capacity of our young people in, well, not young people alone, but at all ages, from primary onwards. It looks on building the capacity of our young people. And so the Caribbean New School model is really what is being implemented at the secondary and the primary school level, that will seek to nurture our youth in such a way that there is lifelong learning. The teachers, there's a teacher development aspect of it, there's a curriculum development aspect of it, changing the whole learning environment. So there's a number of things that are being done, as well as strengthening the partnership between the community and schools. So there's a number of mechanisms that are being used in order to strengthen how we go about teaching and our young people, as well as the learning process that is being modified for persons to adapt to the 21st century. So I hope that answers your question in terms of the human capital development and gaining access to the various programs that the CARICOM actually delivers. You can also visit our website, because there's a CARICOM Facebook page. There is and it's called Caribbean Community Facebook. So you can go to that Facebook page. We usually send or post in there. There is a program that was actually delivered in Barbados that we have recordings, and we will be posting this program. It's really about professional development, and we'll be posting this program on the web on our website actually today, on our Facebook page, as well as the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Facebook page, for young persons within the Caribbean to actually have access to these learning tools. So there are opportunities out there. You all just need to search for it, to find it, and seek the help of those who can actually give assistance. Thank you.
On that note, from the OACS's point on the disabilities question, right now the OACS, we have our PPS into a pool procurement system for the region, and one of the items that we are looking to see whether it be beneficial to procure for pool procurement are assistive devices for persons living with disabilities. We have reached out to member states for the number of persons who live with disabilities and the type of assistive devices that they would require, so we could put together a plan to see how viable this is to ensure that everyone with a disability can get the assistive devices that they need in order to lead a quality life. We are also currently running an online job program, an initiative which is geared to begin on October 12th. And we are specifically for persons who are disadvantaged, including those with disabilities. Going forward, the Human and Social Division are targeting persons with disabilities, because we realize that this has been a community which has, for a long part, been silent in a lot of our programs. And even now, in the discussion that we're having, I am hoping that Anguilla has reached out to persons with disabilities so that they could tune in and actually be part of this conversation. And we are hoping to mainstream every program that we have where youth are concerned, but in general, that persons living with disabilities will be accounted for or taken into account when we do these programs. For the teachers question, I find that your wording was very interesting, saying policing the teachers. I'm not sure that is something that any of us at the regional level can do. That would be more a national concern. Although saying policing teachers is, I'm not sure the teachers would appreciate it, but I get what you're saying. And for that, through the EDMU, the Education Development Management Unit at the OECS, and in working in tandem with CARICOM through the Safe Schools Initiative and the new design for schools, there is a program to build the capacity of those who are to assist them to get the level of qualification and experience that would enable them to be the best educators that they can be. If you want any further details on our program, you can contact the EDMU directly, and I'm very sure they'd be happy to have a chat with you regarding that. On the exchanges program for professionals, academics, and students, currently the OECS is partnering on the Interreg project with a number of our French territories for language exchanges, where you would have our English-speaking countries, the students go to the French territories and vice versa. We are also looking to expand this past just the language to include professionals in the exchange. So we're looking to create a program which would see our young professionals, let's say in Anguilla, sign up for the program, and they are not really interned, but they're sent on an exchange with an organization or a company in, let's say, St. Vincent and the Grenadines for a few months, so they could work and get experience as well. So you learn about a different country, but you also learn different ways of doing things, and you learn about the laws and the procedures as well. So that is another program that we're looking to institute as well at the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yoshabel. I would like to ask at this time if Mr. Henry Charles would like to make any final remarks or closing comments at this time.
Well, thank you, and very, very engaging, very interesting session. There were two points of discussion that I think, beyond just the youth development, we need to really continue those discussions at the national level in a very profound way, and that is the one around issues of young people in need of care. That's one, because, for instance, I think ever since the Moyne Commission came to investigate the conditions in the Caribbean post-emancipation and identified a number of young people who were underrepresented, underserved, and made recommendations which we embrace, social welfare approaches to addressing young people who are underserved or are not properly supported. You know, we have embraced them and have gone forward, and we have not focused sufficiently on what are the contributing factors to things like young people being in need of care and addressing those factors rather than just providing the remedial aspect of it, or both of them could be done. Another point that on the question of young people and the juvenile and the coming offenders, also, we take a lot of the time, I find we take a law and order approach to it. Now, I am not here questioning the importance of law and order and those things. I think most of our young people themselves support the question of law and order. But I think one of the characteristics of youth, as those who have gone through it would know and those who I live with know, young people have what we call a propensity to take risks. And our society has, to a large extent, either stigmatized or criminalized young people's propensity to take risks. That's something I want you all to focus on. Are we just, I'm not saying young people should not take responsibility, but are we as societies just focused on penalizing young people for risk-taking? From the discussions, I think it's clear that there is no magic bullet to address the myriad of priorities, challenges, issues that we need to, that there are some short-term deliverables that we need to focus on, there are medium-term deliverables, and that there are also long-term deliverables. I think the session this morning also re-emphasized, as we said previously, the synergies that exist in terms of the various organizations that are in the space, from the Commonwealth to CARICOM to the OECS to CDB. And that, let it be said that perhaps this 14th youth conference was perhaps a catalyst in helping those agencies in a more collaborative way engage in a kind of a holistic approach rather than we having each doing their own thing and only now and then we might come together. So I think it's something that we must, coming out, really emphasize the need for that partnership and strategic and more collaborative approach going forward. And I think you all would have just witnessed and been exposed to and introduced to some of the finest and most conscientious public servants that we have within the Caribbean and the Commonwealth space. In fact, they are all Caribbean people. They are doing work quietly. They're doing very good work. The thing about you would learn from what they're doing as well, and you in Anguilla involved in youth development, is that it is not often that they receive the support and the kind of acclamation and commendation, that they should. So I think we really need to pay some tribute to those persons, some of our finest and most conscientious public servants that we have in the space in terms of social and youth development in the Caribbean and the Commonwealth. Thank you for the opportunity, people, and one love. Yeah.
Thanks everyone very much. That brings us to the end of this morning's session. I must apologize, however, because we have to resume at 1, because our ministers will be here and we want to respect their time. So I'm asking you, as you go to lunch, it's going to be at the Sir Optimist Center once again, to be conscious of the time and be back here for 1 o'clock. Please also start considering those questions that you would have for the ministers and other leaders in government. All right.
Has the future ever come through the efforts of one? It is and always will be that of a collective. As youth, you are, we are, the future. Yet, we are guided by our beliefs, molded by our parents, driven by our passions, and taught by our seniors. Our shared purpose to ensure a future for the future. Has the future ever come through the efforts of one? It is and always will be that of a collective. As youth, you are, we are, the future. Yet, we are guided by our beliefs, molded by our parents, driven by our passions, and taught by our seniors. Our shared purpose to ensure a future for the future.